People think of Spartans being some of the deadliest fighters, but records written in the Sikh literature is there were close to almost 1 million Mughal fighters in that city, and there were only around 40 Sikh fighters.
I can think of 2 instances off the top of my head where there were fewer than 300 Sikhs and thousands of enemies. So Guru Singh Bahadur, he was besieged for 80 days. I don't know how you can hold a castle for 80 days, but he did. And of course, the one that everyone knows about is the Battle of Saragarhi, when there were 21 Sikhs who held out against 10,000 Pathans from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And we're live. Kulio, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate it. Okay, so I know that you're not going to be partaking in the smoking, but do I have your permission to smoke on the show?
Yeah, it's yes. That's how you chat. I'm fine with that.
That's how we do it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So today we have a topic that I find really interesting. I know that you're passionate about. We're talking about the history of the Sikhs. Yes. And something that I didn't know about is even today, the Sikhs are very oppressed in India. Is that true?
Yes. Yes, they are. And the Sikhs are not the only group, but it's one of the few groups that has always fought against its oppressors.
I've met a couple of other Sikhs and very nice people. I know that's one of the values that you preach is just being nice to everyone. No concept of gender, no concept of, class, anything like that.
Correct. Guru Nanak Dev, the founder of Sikhism, he believed in equality for all men and women. And he also made sure we moved away from the caste system. Caste system in India is basically what we have in the States. You got the social classes, low, middle, upper. While caste system has even further breakdowns. Depending on the caste you're born into, you may not even get chances for opportunities in life just because where you were born. Sikhs, Guru Nanak Ji believe that we don't need caste. We're all children of God, and we all should have the equal opportunity. And women in India were also around that same time. Women were treated as property. A lot of other world as well. Back during his time, when a woman's husband would die, there were people who told a woman, "Hey, your husband's got useless." They would tell them to throw themselves on the fire and kind of get rid of himself that way.
Really?
And, yes.
Wow.
And he said that women are individuals. They should have the right and preach equality that the men have. There's actually a famous quote by Guru Nanak Ji. Let me actually look that up. I don't want to misquote it.
Okay.
But yeah, do continue speaking.
So Guru Nanak Dev actually had an interesting story. He was founded in the caste system, right? And I think that he was actually a Hindu growing up, but what I read is that
Hindu family.
Okay.
But a lot of the time people believe if you're born into a Christian family, it doesn't mean you're a Christian. It means you were born into a Christian family. The choices you make is what defines you.
Right, absolutely. No, but so I think that's just because India is predominantly Hindi. But he went out to, it's funny because he began his life working as a granary, like a manager. So it's just like this, Joe Blow clerk job, whatever, in the Punjab region. And then one day he went out to the lake to meditate, and he was in so deep a trance that actually he stayed out there for 3 days, or at least so the story says. And then when he emerged, he was proclaiming things like, there is no Hindu, there is no Islam, God is genderless, formless, we're all one together. And that was radical because of, like you said, the caste system.
Correct.
Yeah. So did you find the quote?
Yes, and because of what he was saying, it was challenging everyone out there. And yes, the quote about women, he said, women should be respected, treated equal. He said, we are born of women. We are conceived in the womb of women. We are engaged and married to women. We make friendship with women, and lineage continues because of women. One woman dies and we take another. We are bound with the world through women. We should talk. Why should we talk ill of women, of her who gives birth to kings? The woman is born from a woman. There is none without her, or true. Oh, only the one true Lord is without a woman. Sorry,
Right.
sorry about the pauses there. Basically, he's like, you guys got to stop. We can't treat women the way they did. And that was very early on. That was when Sikhism was first started by Guru Nanak Ji.
Right. No, and this is in the middle of the caste system. So I can understand why they would want to silence people saying this, because the people at the top, they would want to keep their power. And that's a very basic human motivation, is keeping your status, keeping your power. I mean, like, think about people in your high school and what they did for popularity, right? Like,
Correct.
It's all the same. So, he comes out saying these things, and his buddies are probably like, bro, you need to calm down. But no, he actually got a lot of followers. The first one was Guru Angad Dev. He was actually heard one of Guru Nanak's Sikhs, or one of his students, because the word Sikh means student, right?
Correct.
Preaching, and he was so just enamored by what he said, he went to go meet Guru Nanak Dev and actually converted to Sikhism. And then he actually wrote a lot of the early texts of the Sahib. Is that correct?
Yeah, the Guru Granth Sahib. Yes, that's the holy scripture that the Sikh follow. But back then, it wasn't the full established Guru Granth Sahib, because there were individual parts that were written. The whole collection was actually put together by the last guru, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Don't quote me on this. I'm not a history buff, but
you are today.
Individual gurus, and that's the only major difference between every other religion. All the work that was written in Sikhism is actually by the gurus themselves.
Yeah.
So no secondhand interpretation. Hey, we thought they were trying to say this. It was written by them and kept there.
Right, by like directly from those people. Whereas like Christianity, that was written 100, 200 years after Jesus died and after the prophets died. And actually, I read that there are writings in the Sahib, or
Guru Granth. Sorry, go ahead.
How do you say it?
Guru Granth Sahib is the scripture.
Guru Granth Sahib. So there are writings in there actually from people of other religions.
Correct. Like Farid Bakht is another famous one from Islam. There are a few from Hindu prophets. Any scripture that talked about God and showed love for God, their scripture was in there.
Right.
There are quite a few. I don't want to pronounce their names incorrectly. I was raised in the States, so yes, I pronounce the names incorrectly sometimes, a way an American would pronounce it. I do apologize about that.
Okay. I'm going to do plenty of that on the show, so nothing to be sorry for. But I thought that was really interesting. But what it shows is the religious toleration of the Sikhs. They're very inclusive, and you see that a lot in their history, because when the Sikh Empire formed, it was actually only about 10% Sikhs. It was mostly Muslims and Hindus who just preferred Sikh occupation to Mughal occupation. And we'll actually get ahead and talk about that.
There were other groups too. Whenever Maharaj Ranjit Singh, he was a Sikh leader that was in charge before the Sikh Empire, Punjab as an empire eventually crumbled. There were other groups in there as well, other minorities. I think there were Jewish populations in South Asia as well. Islam, and even within Islam, there's, I think, subgroups. While they were there, all of those groups were given equal voice. While individuals were in the court, no non-Sikhs were told, hey, you have to become a Sikh. Right. They were they preach the people to believe and worship what they want to believe in.
Mhm.
If somebody asks you about Sikhism, yeah, we'll tell them. Well, we do not, as Sikhs, we don't force somebody else to believe in what we believe in. That is against one of the core tenets.
Right. And I think that one thing we were talking about before is the Sikh martyr, Guru Tegh Bahadur, right? It
Yes, yeah.
says that he, what I read on just on Wikipedia is that he died actually protecting Hindus from Aurangzeb, who was this very evil Mughal emperor who wanted to eradicate all the Sikhs. And we're going to talk a lot about him, but can you expound on that?
Yeah. So during his era, he actually tried to force convert people that were Hindus back in the day in Punjab and Delhi. Sikhs believe that, hey, everybody should be able to worship what they want to worship. You shouldn't be doing that. And he had said to the Sikh Guru Tegh Bahadur that either they convert or you give your head, because he was the Sikh leader. He gave his own life so those people could believe and worship what they wanted to believe in, so they can have that quality, that
Okay.
principle. So
Yeah. So let's go ahead and talk about the history surrounding when the Sikhs came about. So it comes about around 1600 AD, and this is it really comes into fruition then, because I know that Nanak Dev came out around 1500, but 1600 is the early Sikh days, and you have the Mughal Empire. So the Mughals are actually foreigners; they're not Indians, and they took over India. So you've got foreigners ruling, and they are very Islamic, correct?
correct.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them were based in Afghanistan. Like I think it started with Babur in the mid 1500s. Very early on, the Sikh leaders, they preached peace and were willing to work with everybody. While all of that was happening, a lot of them went after different groups, minorities, trying to force convert. Back in the day, anytime somebody took over anything, the first thing they did is you take over the religious institutions, because that's where the power is, where people do what their religions kind of state. And the Sikhs early on would stand up for the rights of anybody that needed help. But there was one guru who was a saint soldier, who decided, hey, enough is enough. And that was Guru Har Gobind Singh. And he was the first to teach the importance and the necessity to keep arms, to not only protect yourself, but protect the weak and the needy.
Okay, he was the last one, correct?
No, he was actually the sixth guru.
Okay.
He had two swords, one who was called Meaty and one who was called Piri. And one was for protection. And so there's actually an academy named after him there. But yes, Sikhs believed in, hey, let everybody do their thing, but don't be that guy.
Right.
Well, so
like don't be stupid. Like if you need to protect yourselves or protect other people, like you have the right to royally fuck people up, basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And I think when you said the last guru, that was Guru Gobind Singh.
Guru Gobind
He
Singh.
was Guru Gobind Singh fought a lot of battles. He lost his two oldest in a battle of Chunkar Sahib. That's actually where I was born.
Oh wow.
And the other two were bricked alive. They were the youngest, 7 and 9 years old. The battle that was fought in Chunkar Sahib was actually was different. People think of Spartans being some of the deadliest fighters. I think there were probably records out there, but records written in the Sikh literature is there were close to almost 1 million Mughal fighters in that city. Mm-hmm. And there were only around 40 Sikh fighters.
Right.
And when they fought in units of 5. 5 because we had the Panj Pyare, the 5 beloved ones. They were given Amrit, which is the ritual. You accept the responsibility of following the Sikh path 100% by the book. And these Panj Pyare were the original one. Then, but they fought in groups of 5. The 2 oldest gave their life as martyrs.
Right.
And that I don't know the exact date.
Well, no, I think you're right about the Sikhs being, better than the Spartans in a lot of ways, because I can think of two instances off the top of my head where they were fewer than 300 Sikhs, and I mean like thousands and thousands of enemies. So one was actually when I'm actually gonna look up his name here so I don't misquote it. It was Bahadur, Guru Singh Bahadur. He's the one who established the Sikh Empire. He was besieged for 80 days. I don't know how you can hold a castle for 80 days, but he did. Thousands and thousands of Mughals, right? They ended up losing, but he held out for 80 days. That's dedication. And then, of course, the one that everyone knows about is the Battle of Saragarhi, when there were 21 Sikhs who held out against 10,000 Pathans from Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So, yeah, no, but you're absolutely right about that. And also, fun fact: the Sikhs make up about 40% of the Indian military today, and they only make up about 2% of the population.
Yeah, it's just the principle the Sikhs believe in: fighting and standing up for people is core. It's just nowadays the Indian military. India is a very interesting place. When they want to put somebody in the front of the line, they say, hey, they send the Sikhs. When they know they're doing something right, they say, oh yeah, the Sikhs didn't do anything. There's a power behind the political parties right now, like the BJP, which is backed by RSS, one of the political parties that's also recognized as a terrorist group. Before the current prime minister became a prime minister, some of their members were not allowed into the U.S. Yes, they elect. Yes, there's a lot happening there. But that group, if you follow them throughout history, they are against equality of like any minorities, not just Sikhs. It's just the Sikhs are the ones who stand up against them. The most famous, I think, recent history is 1984.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that too.
Yeah, 1984, the Sikhs had a leader, Sant Jarnail Singh. He would stand up for any Sikh. He would stand up for anybody, even if they were not a Sikh, if they were being mistreated.
Okay.
And then you have site bops where they publish false information, and people are saying he was an agent of the Congress. So the political party in charge at that time was the Congress.
Right.
And they sent, and that was backed by the Prime Minister Indira Gandhi, and they were also being supported by this group RSS.
And is this Gandhi's one of Gandhi's kids or like a relative?
I probably she was a female leader.
Right. She was.
India was heading its time. It would not have been if they were progressive, but at the same time, not all in there. Some of the leaders. They had planned to attack the temple, to take a lot of lives. They were planning to go in a day or so and take over, but they didn't realize.
To wipe out the Sikhs, right? Up in Punjab.
Wipe out the Sikhs. It was also around the same time there was a holiday. People were going into the temple, but they were not letting people come out. There was a total media blackout in the entire country. They sent in tanks. They killed people who were there praying, and the Sikhs, they fought against it. And one of the guy who was a general for the Indian army, he saw what was really happening, and he left the army and joined them and helped figure out how to strategically fight, because some of the stuff that was happening was wrong. It had nothing to do with they saying, oh, he's a terrorist. He's not a terrorist. He was a Sikh leader, and they were just worried if he could get the entire country, Punjab, to get in order within a few years, they were going to lose Punjab. India, since Punjab was first founded, if you look at its founding, once the British split it, half went to Pakistan, half went to India. It had the biggest human migration back between the two countries. Punjab, from that point, got split up every few decades. There were two other states founded out of it. And Punjab, if you're from Punjab, it does not mean you're a Sikh. Punjab had other minorities, but there are groups that wanted to make sure people didn't speak languages because Punjabi languages, because certain languages connected with the religion. Like for Sikhs, Punjabi, we had Gurmukhi. They wanted to make a language, one national language, so force people to forget, change history.
Right.
A lot of that stuff happening in the background. While that temple was attacked in 1984, thousands of lives were lost, but
Right.
the temples weren't the only thing. In the villages, right? I think a few months after the prime minister was killed by our own bodyguards who were Sikhs.
Right.
It was,
So this is a very unpopular move, right?
yeah.
Because it was Sikhs, attacking the empire, even though they were openly killing Sikhs with tanks, like you were saying.
But yeah, as Sikhs, a lot of people had left the country, seek political asylums.
Okay. I know that they left to a lot of places like, America, Britain, and actually Canada has the second largest population of Sikhs in the world.
Yes, that is correct. We're trying to wipe them out in Punjab, they gave them a voice on a global stage.
Right.
And Sikhs now are establishing a lot more organizations that help people out in general.
I know that even in India, they have this house. I don't know. I think it's in Punjab, but they give out free meals 24 hours a day, every day.
Yeah, Golden Temple. So that was actually one of the teachings.
Golden Temple. That's a big step up from the house.
Yeah, Golden Temple. It's Harmandir Sahib. So one of the tenets the Sikhs follow is the langar. So every temple has a kitchen. Guru Amar Das established a free kitchen. It was where if food was vegetarian. It doesn't matter if you're a king or a poor man. You had to sit there. If you're given a free meal, but it's to
everyone
show
sits
that
in the same level. No one sits
Yep.
above anyone else. Right.
Correct. That you're all equal. And that temple, before the current politicians took over the kitchens, a lot more people used to volunteer. Indian politics are trying to get into the controlling the temple treasury, just because more money comes into the temple, and the temple basically gives them money back to the community, their food, helping out.
Right.
But
and
yeah,
I heard that it's vegetarian so that everyone can eat it, like, no
Correct.
allergies, anything like that. So,
yep, correct.
but is that part of Sikhism, is to eat vegetarian just anyways?
Yeah, yes. As a Sikh, you're supposed to eat vegetarian food. And then there's Punjabis and there are Sikhs who don't eat it, but as a Sikh, Amarthadi Sikh, you have a stricter lifestyle.
Okay.
Vegetarian food, you don't eat egg. Right now, I think there's another group, the Jains. I think it's another minority that gets treated very badly. They're not Sikhs, but yes, caste
Right.
system.
I know that the Jainists were wearing masks before it was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, the reason they do that is so that they don't swallow any bugs, because they believe in not killing anything.
Yeah. Well, like Sikhs, we believe God exists in each and everything. If you want to, God is in each person, in each living thing, God is there. If you want to love God, be kind to one another, because God is in each and every person. So that also falls under the 3 core golden rules of Guru Nanak Ji, which is Nam Japo, pray, worship day and night, meditate on the name of God, earn honest living. So honest effort and endeavors. And then Vandgashoka, which is share what you have.
That makes a lot of sense, given the history of the Sikhs and what they did around the area, because the way they actually rose to power is they would stop like criminals and robbers from hurting innocent people, and this is how they ended up gaining popularity in the Punjab region. And so eventually they start growing and becoming a popular force, and then Emperor Aurangzeb sees that the Sikhs are becoming this substantial force over in Punjab, and they're like, yeah, we ought to go do something about that. So he sends an army to go quell this rebellion, this fanatical religious group called the Sikhs. And what they did is they actually ordered the army to shave their beards so that they'd be able to distinguish who was a Sikh and who was not. And this leads to what I was talking about, where they were surrounded in Logar, and they were besieged for 80 days. But before that, they were just, they were fighting with the Sikhs for just days and days and losing ground.
They did a lot of horrible things to Sikhs. So on top of they had force shaved the Sikhs. They cut the skin off of Sikhs. There were torture things where they actually cut people in half. Women who were not converted, they cut their kids' limbs, made them into necklace and made them wear that. Some of the things they did were similar to what the Nazis were doing.
No, they did that to the guru in charge of all this, Banda Singh. They did some pretty terrible things to kill him.
Yeah, so that was horrible.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Yeah, pretty much ever since they started, they were fighting against the Mughal oppressors the whole time. But eventually they did create sort of a Sikh empire, because what happened was Emperor Aurangzeb died. And so in the power vacuum, they were actually able to sort of stabilize the region. And one of the ways they did that is they actually captured it was a city called Samana, and they captured a mint, so they had money and financial stability. But then they also started giving local people sovereignty over their farmland, so they could do what they wanted with their farmland. It wasn't owned by the government. So that was one way they sort of won people over.
Yeah, that, and I think Banda Singh Bahadur played a huge role in that. Whenever he fought a major battle right after the last guru's youngest kids were bricked alive, and got rid of every person that was responsible. But yes, any land they took back, they gave back to the people.
And so then they actually start expanding up into what was called modern day Afghanistan. Now, what I didn't know actually is that Pakistan is sort of a new country. That was just India back in the day.
Correct.
So they expanded up towards Kashmir, which Kashmir is actually a pretty sought after place, because if you take Kashmir, you have the high ground and you can launch an attack to anywhere: Pakistan, India, Afghanistan.
Yeah, it's it's one of the best places for a military base. Just its location, how high it is, and you can kind of attack almost anywhere in Europe, North Russia. It's all up. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the reasons there will always be a conflict between India and Pakistan for that region.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the videos of the changing of the guard between India and Pakistan?
Very entertaining.
They're pretty funny. Yeah. But yeah, so one of the key features of terrain is actually the Khyber Pass over in Punjab. And the way they took that is actually, I'm not sure if he was a general or a guru, but Haro Singh Nalwa is sort of the Napoleon or the Alexander the Great of the Sikhs. Have you heard about him?
He was a general. He was a general. Yes. Yep. He was a very strict general. He was very efficient. And when he went to area where people didn't want to fight, he told them to dress a certain way so they would know, hey, these people don't want to fight, so they would move out of the way. To this day, some people still tell boogeyman stories about him to put their kids to sleep.
Really?
Yeah, he was one of the few people. Even I think the U.S. military had an issue taking control of the Khyber Pass. Just the location itself is very difficult to control.
I think it was probably the British.
Yeah, maybe it's the British.
Probably the British.
So yeah, it was very. Yes, he was a general.
So I know, and then after that, they sort of have their own independent state up in Punjab, and this is around the time the British come up to take over, and the British do what the British do every time. Whenever they conquer like Africa or Malaysia, anywhere, they always underestimate the occupying force. So they send a force up to Punjab to take over it, and they severely underestimated the Sikhs. This is called the Battle of Ferozesa, which I'm pretty sure I'm mispronouncing that.
I feel like I probably pronounced it.
Yeah. So the Sikhs were so skilled, they actually even outgunned the British artillery with their cannons. They held this what they did is they demoralized the British by taking out the British soldiers, because the British primarily used Indians to fight. So there were only about 400 or so British, but they primarily used Indians. Well, if you start killing the British rulers, then the Indian sepoys are actually going to flee, and that's what they did. So then the British actually recouped and attacked a second time, and that's when they ended up taking over Punjab.
Correct. Yeah, another reason I think early on the British had an issue taking over was Punjab had a population that was educated. During modern Ranjit Singh's time, he actually had the temples create educational books, and I think over 85% of the population was educated.
Right.
And it's kind of hard to manipulate somebody who is able to read and write. You can't falsely say things.
No, I can't believe I forgot to say that. One of the founding principles of Sikhism is actually education, because they're students. And that's one of the things that I think the second guru did, is he established schools.
Correct.
And made mandatory learning and actually increased literacy and things like that. So
yes.
Yeah, I can't believe I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, it was the schools, education was taught through the temples, since every village had a temple, one kind or another. So education was taught through that, but they didn't just say, hey, you can't learn that religion or that. Hence, Sikh literature has writings from other prophets. So education is important.
Yeah, absolutely. So eventually the Sikhs take over all of, I'm sorry, not the Sikhs, the British take over all of India, right? And they actually enlisted the Sikhs in the British Army, and they had a lot of respect for the Sikhs. You know, they might have had wars here and there with them, but once they enlisted them in the army, they had a lot of respect for them, a lot of trust in the Sikh warriors. And you see this in primarily World War I. They sent about 1 million troops from India to fight in the First World War, and about, again, like 60% of those were Sikhs.
Yeah, I actually watched a documentary back in the day. Like, I wear a smaller turban now. The Sikhs actually wore bigger turbans. They didn't wear the helmets, the metal helmets that the British wore or the other soldiers wore. That after the battles were over, they would take the turbans out. You saw bullets falling out. It was actually more efficient at stopping bullets. But yeah, they sorry, got off track there. Yes, there was a large population, and even when they were fighting for them, they were not recognized as equals, even though they had put their lives on the line for the British, for the rest of the world during World War I.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. British were still very racist, very colonial at this time. And like you said, even the Indian military does that, where the Sikhs do something great. Well, they weren't responsible for that, right?
Yeah, when it comes to India, like, everybody talks about all the stuff that Gandhi did, but they don't talk about all the stuff that other people had done to fight for India's freedom. For Sikhs, we had Sikh people who fought for the rights of India, but they were not recognized for their sacrifices because they were from a minority.
Right. So let's go ahead and talk about the Battle of Saragarhi really quick. Actually, there's a movie made about this in 2019, I believe. It's called Kesari, and what it is, this is just something out of a storybook. I mean, so Saragarhi was this no man's land outpost. Nobody wanted to be there, and it was a signaling post between two other forts. And what they did is they would signal with a solar, it was called heliography. It was like the solar signaling. So that's how we know what happened, because there was actually a Sikh signaling the whole time what was going on. And so about 10,000 Pathans from Afghanistan wanted to take over this fort so it could cut off communication. And these 21 Sikhs, I think they held out for 3 days. They killed hundreds of Afghans. And you could actually see what was going on from the other forts. And the last guy, he signaled out permission to take up my weapon. And then they said, yes, permission. And someone saw him through a telescope kill about like 30 Afghans by himself. It's just, this is phenomenal. And then the Sikhs, actually, I saw the movie. It's a really good movie. It's about 4 hours long, but good movie.
I've not watched that movie, to be honest.
There's this war cry in the movie that I read is actually like a legitimate Sikh war cry. Do you know? You heard about that?
Balay Solian.
Yeah, that. Yeah.
That war cry. Sikhs have used that for any time they fight for anybody. Nowadays, now they're dealing with people saying, "Hey, that's a racist thing." It's like, no, you guys didn't say it was racist when we fought for your rights. So, all that stuff that's happening right now. But yes, that war cry, people back in the day when Sikhs fought, they used it. Now, if they are standing up for something, marching, even a peaceful protest, they will say that. It basically translates to victory of God, or everything we say is for God. I
Yeah.
I don't know the exact translation, but yes, it is a Sikh.
I read a translation at one point. It sounds like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Victory for God. Yeah. I mean, what is a terrorist? It all depends on who you ask, right?
Yeah. Well, and in India, anybody who stands against the current leadership who is considered a terrorist. These women that were currently fighting for the rights of the Kisans, they were fighting, they call them terrorists. So anybody who's standing up for anything in the label or goes against their personal agenda is labeled a terrorist. But that's not going to change.
Right. And then I read that in 1996, they actually started to sort of treat the Sikhs better because of pressure from NGOs in India, like human rights organizations. So do you think that the treatment is getting better as time goes on?
No, no, because there's NGOs that are Khalsa Aid that was helping people out, and even they were labeled as a terrorist group.
Really? Wow. NGOs are terrorists.
Well, because they were this NGO goes into war zones, Khalsa Aid, and helps anybody out that needs food, safety, shelter. They will help them out. And they were going in and giving food. They have helped in Africa and Middle East, even parts in the States. But when they went to India to help out the people that were protesting to give them food, they were labeled as a terrorist.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I think that's all we really have to say. I think we covered it all. But yeah, Kulio, hey, thanks so much for coming on the show, man. I appreciate it.
No
I had
problem.
a good time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, very enlightening. Now, for fellow history buffs and cigar aficionados out there, keep on buffing and keep on puffing. See you in the next one.
Yeah.